We are live now.
Should we get started immediately?
It is podcasting right now, so I think we could.
Let's start around 5:35, so we give people 5 minutes to join the meeting. We're going to start at 5:35. I'm giving a few more minutes for people to join. Okay, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the World Product Day Chicago meetup. Thank you for joining us. I know it is a unprecedented reality and challenging times, both professionally and personally. And I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. And I know, we've had to make this a virtual event, and thank you for taking some time to join us. We do have a full session. We have great speakers with an awesome agenda. And before we get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sarisha Gurjala, Head of Product Management, Emartme, a digital investment advice platform. And we have exciting speakers from various companies around Chicago. And before we get started, I want to provide a brief introduction to ProductTank, especially for those who are joining us for the first time. If you're like me, 10 years ago, when I started my product management career, product managers were pretty lonely. And some of you can probably relate to that. We had some internal resources here and there, but we didn't have a community to kind of rely on or to exchange our insights and ideas. So a group of folks in London started what's now called the Product Tank 10 years ago. And it was a small group that then grew into 200 plus cities with close to 200,000 members part of this organization. And immediately thereafter, Mind the Product was started. Many of you who are members of Mind the Product know and value the great content that is available in the Mind the Product website and the blogs. It's one of the best product management content and conferences in the industry. 10 years later, to the times right now, we do have a huge community, both in Chicago as well as across the globe. And I would encourage everyone to be part of this community, exchange your thoughts, ideas, join the Slack channel, visit the Mind the Product website, as well as Mind the Product Tank Chicago pages to kind of contribute to the overall community and be part of exchanging those ideas. As I mentioned, we do have now Product Rank running in 200 plus cities with close to 200,000 members across the globe. And I personally enjoy attending each one of the events here in Chicago, and I hope you do too. As you all know, it's one of the best product content. Visit mindtheproduct.com website. If you're interested, please reach out to us in terms of blogging, speaking events. If you're interested in hosting some of these events, do reach out to us. And we're always looking for speakers and sponsors. We've recently introduced membership at Mind the Product. So insider membership is always free. You get access to great content, Product Tank local meetups, and any kind of guest authorized blogs that are available along with the Slack channel community. We do have a prioritized membership. It's currently at $150 per year for the first year. And this gives a little bit more information. It gives you all the benefits of the insider, plus the ability to access your other product management peers in the community, running ideas by other product managers, and being able to access some of the premium content. We do have a leader membership, which is actually $690 for the first year. And this is where you can take your product management career and expertise beyond just a individual contributor to more of a leadership role, with access to a lot of industry leaders, exchanging ideas on a quarterly meetings, and being able to contribute and receive content from the product management community. I want to encourage all the product managers and the engineering and designers in attending this session to participate actively in the Product Tank Chicago community. This is your community, and we would like you to be actively involved in the events as well as the Slack channel and the blog channel. So let's get involved. Please reach out. As I mentioned, we are always looking for speakers and people who want to host the events. We do want to hopefully get back to the new norm and start hosting these events in person. But given the situation, this is our first virtual session, and we do hope that you enjoy the interactions with the panelists, and provide any questions that you may have. You can use this chat channel to actually start asking questions, and we will then channel them to the speakers. I want to take a moment to recognize the 10th anniversary of ProductTank. We are really excited and dedicating one day a year to the great art and craft of product management. There are 50 live events happening today across 15 time zones, a total of 25 hours of events. You can see them all at worldproductday.com if you're interested. And with that, I want to turn it over to Mike for today's poolside chat around how COVID-19 has impacted you and your teams.
Thank you, Sarisha. Welcome, everyone. Excited to be here. Excited for our talk today with our panelists. As Sarisha mentioned, big milestone for ProductTank today. 10 years. It's hard to believe. Over 200 cities now. So we thought this topic was very relevant, obviously, for what's happening in the world today. So we thought we would talk to some of the experts here. I want to introduce our panelists for tonight. Let's start with you, Mark Adams, Managing Director at DevBridge. If you want to introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So I'm Mark Adams. As Mike mentioned, I'm a Managing Director at DevBridge. DevBridge has been in Chicago for about 12 years. So most of you probably, or many of you may have heard of DevBridge, but for those of you who don't or haven't, we do custom software development and build digital products for our clients. I had first worked with DevBridge back in my days at Morningstar, and then about 3 years ago moved over to be at DevBridge, and now I'm responsible for the part of our business that works with financial services clients. So prior to being at DevBridge, I was at Morningstar for about 12 years. At Morningstar, I was responsible for a variety of different products. The one that I spent the most time with was a software as a service solution for asset managers and broker dealers. And that also did give me a chance to work overseas for a while out of our London office, which was fantastic. I guess going back a little bit further, I started my career as an engineer. I was a developer to start out in the late 90s, working at the Revere Group to begin with. And then prior to my time joining Morningstar, I had a series of, like fullcontact.com experiences, both here in Chicago as well as on the West Coast, but ultimately came back here to Chicago. And during my time at Morningstar, one further note, I guess, is that I did pick up my MBA at Chicago Booth, which has also been a great community here in Chicago.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Great to have you tonight. Next, I want to introduce Kira Jacobs-Foster. She's a UX leader at Paylocity. Kira, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Kira Jacobs-Foster, and I'm the UX group leader at Paylocity. Paylocity is out in Schaumburg, in Chicago, out in a suburb outside of Chicago, and our business focuses around HCM, which is human capital management. So we started as a payroll company, an HR and payroll company, but today we're basically a soup to nuts company that crosses the gamut between recruiting to benefits to payroll, performance management, and kind of everything in between. At Paylocity, I oversee a team of about 35 plus UX managers, designers, design system engineers, and we just hired our first researcher, which was very exciting. And basically, in my role, I'm responsible for delivery of our employee and supervisor and administrator experiences across all of our 27 products in our product suite. And that also includes oversight of our design system with a dedicated team, which is really exciting. One thing that is unique and fun about Paylocity is that we use our product to run our business. So I use our product every day in my role, both as an employee and a supervisor. We call this drinking our own wine. That was also true when I was at Morningstar, because I was also at Morningstar. I worked together with Mark and Sarisha. And prior to I was at Morningstar for 19 years. I was kind of grew up there as a designer and into a leadership role in user experience and product design. And then I spent, prior to joining Paylocity, I was at Uptake for 4 years.
Excellent, thank you. And our last speaker tonight is Ram Marapan. I'll let Ram introduce himself. He's the director, head of engineering at Here Technologies. Ram, thanks to having you tonight.
Thank you, Mike. By the way, I'm the only non-Morningstar panelist here, so FYI, guys. So currently, I work at Here Technologies. Here is what used to be called as Navtech. Here is kind of the leader in the location intelligence space. They own about 80% of the OEM market. In terms of my responsibilities, I have 3 products. And as we speak, my responsibilities are changing, but still I run engineering for 3 products distributed across 3 sites. The first of the 2 products is about extracting dangerous driving conditions and speed signs from real-time sensor data that we get from the car. And the output of that is actually sending that back to the car so that the ADAS system / robotics could enable the autonomous driving, not level 4, maybe level 2, level 3, but eventually level 4, right? And the third product is what we call as navigation as service, the first of its kind. It is not like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It's a lot different from what it is, though the output could be the same, primarily because both CarPlay and Android Auto uses screen mirroring. But ours is primarily a service that's always on, always connected, gets the freshest content with code running within the IVI system. So all these 3 products are primarily meant for automotive segments. Prior to that, I was at Redbox. I know that was where I accumulated a lot of experience in building and scaling HA systems. Talk about distributed systems, right? You have these 42,000 kiosks all distributed across the country, each having some compute and some storage and trying to communicate with HQ and staying in sync. So a lot of fun challenges, great experience. The second part of my stay within Redbox, I was one of the key principal in getting a streaming system up and running. Eventually, it was shut down, but I could assure you it was not because of engineering. So good. So that's like my past 10 years, and I think I got to pass the torch back to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Ram. We're excited to have you here as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for the introductions. We're going to jump right into things. And I'll introduce myself as well. Mike Jaramillo, co-organizer here at ProductTank. I'm a product manager at ActiveCampaign, which is a CX automation SaaS platform. We do email marketing, CRM, and sales automation for small and medium-sized businesses here in Chicago. I'm going to be moderating tonight. We've got some great questions here tonight. I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you. We're going to do really just back and forth, sort of panel style. We've got some questions lined up. For the audience, if you do have any questions, we're going to have Q&A at the end. You're welcome to post them there on the right side in the chat, and we'll see them and answer those as they come in. But yeah, we've got a lot of great relevant ones here. So our topic tonight, let's talk about this. So COVID-19, this has been really interesting times, I think, for all of us these last few months. Things have really shifted for teams. We're working remote for the most part. We're in an environment we've never been in before. So let's talk about, I just want to open it up just with a very general question. How has this impacted your teams, Mark, Kira, and Ram? Just generally speaking, what comes to mind first? Let's start there. Maybe with you, Mark.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So, I mean, I think obviously for everyone, there was kind of the initial scramble to moving to shelter in place and working from home. And I guess perhaps the perspective that I have is, for both our firm as well as for some of our clients, I think for DevBridge, it was a little bit, uneventful is too strong, but it was something that we were prepared for. So the transition for us to working remotely was pretty seamless because we already have a lot of the tools and technologies set up. We have folks that work remote now, so that was pretty easy for us. The challenge, I think, what we saw is across different clients, different firms struggled to do that depending on how virtual they were already. I mean, obviously, over the past couple months, we've seen most folks normalize to being able to be fully productive from home. At least, again, in our space, where we're building digital products or working with folks that are knowledge workers and so forth. They're not going into factories, but our teams have been able to stay productive through that. And in a lot of cases, we've been able to kind of provide insights to clients on how we do things that have helped them kind of normalize. But I think it's that was kind of the initial phase was getting to where the technology and connectivity was up and running. And that definitely exposed weaknesses in a lot of firms that weren't prepared for everyone to be virtual. So that definitely created some bottlenecks, and some of those bottlenecks were not easy to fix. And in some cases, we're still working through slowness and connectivity issues just because of the volume of people that are working remotely, and that not all resources were meant to be accessed in that way. So some of those things we're still working out. I think it's more the social dynamics that have been more challenging to work through, and we definitely have some nuances to that. And I think that's definitely the social side of it is something I think we'll certainly have an opportunity to explore a little bit later as part of this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Kira, what about you? Tell us a little bit how this has impacted your world.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Paylocity was largely remote prior to COVID-19. Overall, about 45% of the workforce was remote pre-pandemic, and product and tech was about 75% remote. So there were a lot of things that we had already kind of tried to or had adjusted to. So I think like Zoom drain, as I like to call it, there's no transition between meetings and no kind of natural collisions that you have with people. So I think communication has been a big impact and can be an impact when you're working remotely. But I think some of the newer things that came in for like immediately for our team were just, protecting Zoom meetings. Like that was never a thing, people kind of like dropping in on meetings and all of the security that came up around that. And also just supporting the rest of our organization that wasn't used to working remotely. They were looking to us for best practices. So in many ways, we really kept on moving at our regular pace in the same way that Mark talked about that. And in itself, that was challenging because while work remained the same, our home lives all changed so drastically. And we were transitioning to e-learning with children. Some people were getting sick, and we're trying to keep our finger on the pulse of that. And then in our business, a lot of our clients are really we are supporting them because they're restaurants and seasonal business and manufacturing where there was a lot of layoffs and furloughs. Sure. So that impacted some of our priorities, which we'll talk about later. So.
Great. And Ram, what about you? How have things been for you and your team?
So I think personally for me, I'm kind of a people's person, and I miss the relationship of going to work, talking to people, having these cooler talks. And I definitely miss the social aspects of it. In terms of my workload, I would say, and I've heard this from the managers too, one of the things that I personally vouch to do more is to have more skip level one-on-ones. And my managers have already told me that they are working more hours than they used to because they're trying to have these more one-on-one sessions at a regular cadence, probably in even more of a tighter cadence than what they used to. In terms of teams, I think we were already set up to, here is in about 70 countries across the world, and we were kind of set up to deal with all the, from infrastructure standpoint, to deal with remote collaboration, etc. But when this whole thing started, I think, all of us in my group got together, and kind of 4 things came out of that. I would call it as best practices, guidances, or friendly advice, however you want to call it. I think the things were like, okay, here is my designated office area. I have a designated office area. Getting into that space kind of indicates to you, your family and kids, says, okay, dad or mom is at work. The second thing that came out, which was very prevalent, is everybody get on video calls so that we could chat and see each other. That's still a challenge. I'm having a lot of challenges with that. Overall, trying to get people. The one rule we do have is if you are talking, just try to be on video. And then a lot of virtual coffee, lunch, and happy hours. The biggest thing that came out was empathy with your colleagues, right? I think not everybody might have the finest of days. So balance it out. If you sense your colleague is having a bad day, just balance it out. So in general, I think if you look at the numbers, there's about 9 to 10% decrease in productivity when you work remotely. Surprisingly, out of 2 out of the 3 sites, I would say the productivity has increased. And that's very interesting. There are a couple of things which I would like to share, maybe as we go through this panel. That was very geographic based and depends upon, it directly correlates to your commute time. So overall, I think it's not been bad.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know it's definitely shifted a lot of different businesses, a lot of different teams. It sounds like a lot of you were ahead of the curve sort of on Kira explaining how most of your team sort of already trialed the remote environment. And so, yeah, just what we do in product, I think, is rolling with the punches. I want to talk next a little bit about priorities. I know priorities is a big topic, a big conversation. How has this really affected your team's priorities? Have things, Ram, I know you mentioned things have sped up a bit from from a focus level, and tell us maybe a little bit about that if you want to start, Ram.
Sure. I think so. All my teams actually work with automotives, and if you know, and we primarily work with German automakers and some in North America. With all the scaling the German automakers have done, surprisingly, our priorities have not changed. What we do is we do what is called as quarterly planning, and we have a set of features that we want to execute for the quarter. That thing hasn't changed at all, right? I do go back to, we use product board as a product management tool. I do go look at it. I think there hasn't been any change in priorities. It still remains the same. One of the interesting customers that we have now is Lucid. Have you guys heard about Lucid? Lucid is the next gen of Tesla. They're considered to be a little more ultra luxury compared to Tesla. So they are actually going to be using our nav systems. And their deadlines haven't changed. They've been on us. So they were supposed to demo their stuff for New York Auto Show. So we were supposed to get a bunch of functionality so that it's ready. The New York Auto Show didn't happen, but they still wanted all the functionality. So things are rolling on for us. Nothing really has changed, which is very surprising. I can't promise this will be the case after 2 months, but right now that is what it is. So
great. What about for you, Mark? Tell us how have priorities been impacted by this for your team?
Yeah, I think, for our teams, what we need to be more prepared for is for the changing priorities at our clients. And I think we've seen a few very interesting scenarios. We work with airlines, so airlines pretty immediately as part of this move to hey, can we start winding things down and find a safe landing point for the project that's a good place to leave it, because, we're heading into challenging times. On the flip side of that, we also have built a solution that helps emergency room staff, doctors and nurses that the volume and the criticality of that solution, has not changed. And there's a lot of new features given the volumes that people are asking for. So a lot of ongoing investment. That said, that the industry, the medical industry, obviously there's a lot of emergency room going on or activity going around on COVID-19 and intensive care, et cetera. But things like elective surgeries are down dramatically. So a lot of hospitals are foreseeing some real challenges coming up because of the change in the type of work that they're doing. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these solutions and the funding for them evolves over time. And I guess another interesting example is, we had a solution that was targeted to go live in August, but when India shut down, because we were replacing a legacy solution, and when India shut down, instead we needed to find a way to get that into production in 3 weeks. And this was, a few weeks back. So, kind of the emergency we had a workforce that was now moving to be remote who couldn't do their jobs remotely. So the new solution that we were building would enable other people to be able to do that work. And so that became an urgent priority and kind of a drop everything, make this happen type sort of a scenario. So for us, I feel like it's kind of been a blend. And that said, there's also a lot of key initiatives that have been unaffected by current circumstances. And so there's a lot of teams that are just marching ahead. And as Ram touched on, a lot of that just means that teams have been more productive than historically they have been, just because people are more focused and perhaps working longer. So then there's the concerns that come around burnout as well. But yeah, I think for us, it's been more keeping your knees bent and responding to the differences in various industries that as COVID hits.
Absolutely. Kira, what about for you and your teams? I know you manage several teams there at Paylocity, and how has this really impacted some of the UX and design priorities?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the impact to the business has trickled down to the way that we have prioritized work. So, our revenue is actually tied to the number of employees that our customers have. So with furloughs and layoffs, our revenue is down. And while we're still growing, I think where we expected to be busy in the business is not where we're busy. So for instance, there's been a huge uptick in the support side of our business because it's not just about product support, but helping people understand areas of regulation with the CARES Act or how to navigate working remotely, or, helping them, through all of the HR pieces and parts of their business that our product typically supports them on. There were certain webinars that our company did where there were 5,000 people online, trying to learn about how things would work for them with the CARES Act. Mm-hmm. But, and then there were other pieces of it that trickled down into that. So through the CARES Act and through us being a payroll business, we actually had to implement a way to transfer the money and actually pay out that money to our customers' employees. So there was a huge shift in rolling out a feature, once we understood the details of that regulation, and we had to process and distribute paychecks for our clients. But also, in the area of data analytics, we set up an emergency setup dashboard for our clients so that they could look at employee stats on whether they had emergency contact information, addresses, phone numbers, whether their employees were using mobile access. And so how were people accessing information and how were people being communicated through their employers. So for instance, we also opened up, we have a communication tool. So opened up a communication tool and a learning module. So we had to very quickly make those free to our customers. Whereas before we were offering them as part of our package, and it was it was something that we charged for. So a lot of different priorities, that work all happened, and we turned things around really quickly. And so we dropped a lot of the things that we were working on in order to get these things out to our customers. And then now we're actually working through some of the issues that they have in terms of, say, doing onboarding of employees. So we have an onboarding tool, and never in the past have we ever really had to do a bulk rehire, but now we have to figure out how we can support our customers in doing bulk rehires, because that's how they're going to rehire a lot of their workforce. So a lot of different priorities kind of shifting at a more strategic level in the way that we're supporting our customers, but also within our product suite and where we're choosing to spend our time in development to support our customers through the changes in their business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a good point, and I think this might be a relevant time to plug this in. Connor, we have an attendee question here that I want to read from Connor that I think we'll start maybe with you, Kira, because I think you brought up some good points there about just doing user research and accommodating user needs during this time. But Connor asked, we've seen budgetary challenges and limited ways which we can do research during the pandemic. What challenges have you experienced with UX or other product research, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I think that, so we just hired our first user researcher in January at Paylocity. It was the practice of user research. Now, I've been at Paylocity since August, so I will say, like, I'm new to the business. And the research function at Paylocity historically was done through the avenue of the product designer. So we're really trying to build up our practice of research. I would say in our case, the way that it impacted it was that it really kind of derailed like what we were trying to do strategically for setting some groundwork for research, because a lot of the areas where we had determined we wanted to do research became irrelevant, and we then kind of had to start over. So for us, it's been a little bit of a reset in determining where to focus and lay the foundation for that practice in our organization. That said, I don't want to dismiss all of the rich information that we get through our business because of the way that we support our customers through, just a high touch point with our customers and good, product support with them. It was actually very similar at Morningstar too. So in that way, it hasn't really impacted in terms of budget or like research not happening. It's just shifting where we want to do research. Now, in terms of the way that it's impacted user experience, I would say that we pushed out in those times for those features that I mentioned. We pushed out a tremendous amount of work that we did not scrutinize nearly as highly as we would have given the timeframes that we were trying to get it out. So it was getting the information was better. Getting the information to our customers was better than scrutinizing the user experience and making sure that it was the best that we could make that. So
absolutely.
So I hope that, Connor, answers your question. If it doesn't, follow up and I can try to answer it in a better way.
What about Ram or Mark? Either of you? I know maybe you can speak on how your UX or design teams might have shifted or had any budgetary challenges or other challenges.
Yeah, I mean, the one comment that I would make is I think at this time we definitely have projects that are having to re-up or go back for budgetary approval, given the changing conditions, the fact that the second half of the year might be challenging for a lot of different industries. So in some cases, it makes it an even stronger argument for doing kind of the upfront research to make sure that we are still focused on the right things and that the business case is solid. So I think in our case, we haven't seen perhaps as much pressure to not do research as much as like, hey, I've got to go back to this product review board for additional funding. Can we have some conversations and help visualize and help people understand the investment and the expectation of the value of this investment and kind of validate that against some of our expected users?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's shift a little bit to, I know collaboration has been a huge topic as well. It's come up quite a bit. I know me personally, my teams, we've totally had to shift how we're doing sprint planning. Each of my team members has a deck. We do poker planning, so we each have a story point deck. completely different doing that remotely than all in the same room, and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about how collaboration's been for some of your teams and what that looks like today versus how it looked before. Maybe we'll start with you, Ram. I think you might be muted.
Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest collaboration bottleneck to date that we haven't seamlessly been able to solve would probably be around our planning sessions that happen. We have solved probably 80 to 90% of it, and the tools that we use currently to solve a lot of those, which we did not have access to, was Miro. Having said that, Miro is an excellent tool. It actually gives you a lot more surface area for creativity. And I'm starting to see a trend where people are getting really used to Miros, and that thing has been absolutely godsend for us. The best part is, as opposed to your coach, rolling all the white papers, taking it back, putting it in an Excel spreadsheet and sharing with everybody, it's all out of the window now, right? So everything is in Miro. Everybody is able to collaborate pretty well. So other than that, I think if you're going to ask me for one thing that everybody still complains is your natural way of having design sessions and whiteboarding, right? That I don't think there is a solution for that yet. I think I hear a lot of complaints on that. There were some tools that we actually started to use, but it's still not as natural as I would want it to be. I don't know whether you guys have used the Wacom tablets. It basically gives you the ability to draw on the screen, but it's still not as natural as I would like it to be.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard of those. I haven't used them personally, but I've heard the experience is not the same as in person. So it's I think they're getting there though, hopefully. Kira, what about you and in the design and UX side of things? How is obviously a designer, UX researchers doing a lot of collaboration with all areas of the business, collaboration on the customer side as well. How has that looked for your teams?
So, yeah, I mean, I think, even though Paylocity, was largely remote, we typically had frequent on-sites at our headquarters to do customer as co-creator sessions, and just for more of the strategic sessions for teams. Teams would come in quarterly and do, day-long strategy sessions. And so I think that we haven't done a lot of those, I would say, in the, we stopped traveling in our organization probably in the second week of March. And so we just haven't tried to do those things yet. But, within this new quarter, our fiscal year is actually, it's July to July. And so we're actually coming to our year end. And so there's a ton of strategic planning going on. And so, we're doing it very much in our remote way, largely using Zoom for kind of the business piece of it. But, specifically, I mentioned this customers co-creator sessions, and we didn't do a customers co-creator session with any of our customers, but we did have a cohort of associate product owners come on, and there was a team of us that did a remote customers co-creator training session with them, which was, it was really fun and really, really challenging. We used Mural and Zoom, and there were 4 of us facilitating it. But, and basically what it is we were taking them through the double diamond process of, exploring an opportunity space and a solution space, the diverge and converge. And, we probably had to put a lot more prep time into it and try to figure out the logistics of it. We really tried to simulate the in-person process of actually sketching. It was really funny. We had people like drawing on things and uploading things to Slack and Mural. But it's challenging, it's an adjustment to a new paradigm, and we just had to be in it together. I think one of the things that's really challenging is keeping the attention of the virtual room. It's easier to do in person. And then it's really hard to read a room too. It's really hard to read people's level of engagement. And it feels like you're kind of juggling more balls. I don't know that we've come up with a solution to it, but interestingly, we actually have to do 2 more of these training sessions over the next 3 months. And so we're refining it. We're probably, going to shorten it or break it into 2 shorter periods with some kind of work to do in between so that it's not all online. For what Ram said too, I think I don't know that there is a solution for whiteboarding either. Like, we do struggle with that. We have, I would say that there are a lot of people that have whiteboards behind their desks, and they whiteboard like through Zoom, basically.
I have seen that. So, Mark, what about you? I know you mentioned a couple of things from the internal side, from the client-facing side. How's collaboration look for you guys?
Yeah, I think Ram and Kira covered it pretty significantly. What I would say too is that the most significant new tool that we use is Miro, and there's a learning curve that goes with it. It's definitely a tool that our clients aren't familiar with, and we've kind of done a deep dive on our team. Kira pointed out, to host these sessions, you definitely have to have more people involved in facilitation to help it be successful in a way that it's a little bit easier and natural. Like if we're doing a lean requirements workshop and everybody's in the room, everyone just grab Post-its and off we go. You definitely have to have more arms and legs on our side, making the technology seem easier. Dry runs, because it's just easier to screw up and then kind of have awkward moments where it's hard to recover. So there's a lot more overhead that goes into prepping. 2 things that I would mention that I think were kind of hinted at earlier is, as we used to do like full day sessions or 2-day sessions, we've definitely moved to multiple smaller sessions because the fatigue level is much higher. And then we also take more frequent breaks because there's a lot more demand on each participant to focus. And so to be successful, I think you've got to trim it down and have more frequent breaks and have more people involved. But I do feel like we've been able to be successful in that. We just, are still kind of learning those best practices.
Sure. For the next question, we kind of touched on this a little, but I'd love to quickly go around and just, if all of you can go down the line of just some productivity tools that your teams have used, either that are new that maybe you used before and we're just seeing an increase now. Let's start maybe with you, Ram. What are some tools, if you just want to name out some? Oh, Ram, I think it's muted.
Yes. So if you're primarily talking about tools, I think we are Cisco shop, so we use WebEx Teams, WebEx. But what we do use a lot more than what we used to is the channels within Teams, which is super helpful, right? It's very collaborative, very vibrant now than what it used to be before. A typical use case before COVID would be, I want to do a design session, I walk in, I tap on somebody's shoulder or I breathe. People turn around and say, hey, can we go ahead, do a design session? We walk into a room, you do a whiteboarding. Things are a little bit different now, right? I think you have team channels, people are answering questions. If they have design sessions, they have to. One thing that's different now than what it was before is to have some presentation materials that you need to walk in for a design session. So people could see the same things and work on it as a starting point. So right now it would be more like, hey, ping on Teams or Slack, set up a time, get a presentation material ready, and then meet and talk and collaborate and design, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, what about you? I know you mentioned Mira. Are there any others?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of use we have to use everything that our clients use. So we work with firms that, Teams is how they collaborate. We internally use Slack more often. It is kind of all the sharing tools. There's definitely strong opinions on a lot of is using Microsoft's code collaborative editing, is that good or bad? People, have different opinions on how they enjoy that experience. Everybody likes Slack and Zoom. We use WebEx again. Some clients can't use Zoom, but we primarily use Zoom. And then I kind of already mentioned Miro is kind of the new one that we're kind of going big on because it seems like a good new tool to add to the portfolio.
Yeah. What about you, Kira? I know you mentioned.
I would not say that we have anything new. Mural and Whimsical is another thing that we use as a design team, but typically we're communicating through Zoom and Slack as an organization. But interestingly, because we use our own product, we do have some features in our product that that support more communication. So we have something called journals. So instead of one-on-one, sometimes we're communicating through journals as ways of giving updates to our teams and to our leadership. And then we also have something called community, which is very similar to Slack, but it's for industries that don't have Slack, like a lot of people that aren't kind of in the office, like a lot of like manufacturing or restaurant industries. So interestingly, we actually, I think, have just kind of doubled down more on using some of our products too. So
excellent.
Yeah.
And I know we had an attendee question. Destiny asked, has anyone tried Envision Freehand for whiteboarding?
I think that my team has, but we have not. And I know Destiny. Hi, Destiny. We have not, but I can connect her with someone in my team that has tried it. So.
Excellent. Yeah, she mentioned it. She believes it has sticky note capabilities now, yeah, which looks pretty cool. I'll have to check that out. Let's talk a little bit about. I know we talked a lot about how teams are working together and collaborating, and some tool sets that we're using now and more frequently. Let's talk a little bit about the client and user side of things. How are clients, how are our users adapting for all of you? I know all of you mentioned sort of different industries and different user bases that you all work with. Mark, let's maybe start with you on this one. I know DevBridge works with all kinds of different clients. So you mentioned, I think, travel industry, healthcare. How are the clients and users adapting?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point, I feel like from the day-to-day, most folks have normalized on, how to work from home effectively as an organization. I mean, there was kind of that initial scramble to get people monitors, like dual monitors and the right setup and have the right, ability to be productive at home. And I think we've kind of crossed that hurdle. I think different industries, to a certain extent, some are more clear cut. I think a lot of our clients, there's kind of this pause right now of, like, where are we? What can we expect going forward? So I think what we're seeing is shorter funding cycles, where people are trying to make decisions for the next couple months, next few months, whereas they might have historically been working in longer cycles, just waiting to see how things shake out. And again, like I mentioned earlier, kind of going back for funding that you thought was secured. So some of those kind of like business operations changes are still there. I also think just across the board, everyone just at a personal level, and Ron kind of touched on this earlier, there's a lot of fatigue that's out there. Like burnout is such a critical risk, because I think there's a lot of folks that have been working really hard over the past several weeks to make things, to keep things together and adapt to the new normal. And it is not everyone. I think if people are erring on one side or the other, I think people are erring on the side of using that commute that they had to work more. And if you're kind of stuck in a one-bedroom apartment, it can be harder to make that change to not working. So overall, fatigue is a significant challenge. And I think different organizations are addressing that in different ways. I think what we're seeing is some industries are more receptive to starting to bring people back in and open up their offices in the safer way as possible, just so people can feel like they have more of a community, because it is just challenging to address some of those interpersonal gaps when everyone is remote.
Absolutely. Ram, what about for your user base? How have things been? I know you mentioned you work closely with automotive industry, and how has that been?
Surprisingly, it hasn't slowed down actually, and that's actually very strange,
Yeah.
to say the least, right? I think the productions have scaled back in Europe, but still, I think all these application owners, a lot of the stuff that we work on is probably something that's going to be in a car in about a year or a year and a half. So that thing hasn't changed, and funding for that hasn't gone down. So we still have test drives that go and test our products and say, okay, this is where your KPI is. You either suck or you're terrible, right? That thing is going on. So that hasn't changed. So from my vantage point, I haven't seen too much of decrease in pace, which is very surprising, really.
Yeah. That's probably a good problem to have for business, it sounds like.
Well, I'm hoping this continues for the rest of the year, right? So,
Kira, what about you? I know you touched on this a little earlier. How has this been for on the? I know you guys do B2B, so how's that been?
I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen in terms of how clients and users are adapting is just how they're communicating, and probably in the same ways that we're seeing it. While Zoom is good, oftentimes there is the person that will never say anything on Zoom. So figuring out different avenues and channels for communication and getting information from their employees, so that they're making the right decisions on behalf of their employees in the way that they support them. Another thing too is, in the way that their businesses need to adapt. We have something called Attestation in our product. And what that is basically, historically, what it's been is at the end of a shift, you basically have to say that you didn't have an incident on your shift, right? So that you didn't have any kind of, safety incident. Well, now all of, employers need to do an attestation at the beginning of their shift, right? So it's doing health checks and getting people to check in not on a kiosk because no one wants to touch anything. So how do you transition people to using a mobile application, or making sure that if someone's checking in, there's geofencing so that you actually know that they are at work. They're not checking in from their home, the comfort of their home. And then it also goes into considerations that some people you wouldn't necessarily even think of. So one of our customers is actually in Texas and they work outside. And so taking someone's temperature if they're working outside is not really a practical way of checking their health, because if it's 110 degrees out, chances are their temperature is going to be high. So it's they're having to adapt to some of the things that are being set as standards, and those aren't they're not practical as standards for their business. So it's really interesting. Really.
Yeah, it is. I've noticed it really just depends on the industry and the type of business or platform really that you're working in. I know at Active Campaign, all of our users are small and medium and enterprise businesses, which are, a lot of them are starving for business right now, frankly, to stay sort of alive. And so we're actually seeing levels and volume of email sends. We're an email marketing platform. So we're seeing that volume as high as we normally would during Black Friday and Cyber Monday timeframes, which are our busiest send times. So it's really interesting how it shapes those types of industries. I want to move a little bit to, we had some attendee questions beforehand that some of our attendees submitted during sign up. So I want to cover those and then open it up to Q&A. and then we'll do a wrap up here. One of the questions that came in, this is a really interesting one. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we respond to this. Are product teams taking less risk now? I really want to hear this, if everyone's opinions on this. Mark, maybe do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think the answer is that depends. I mean, there's definitely more uncertainty right now. So I think there are definitely places where we have clients that are trying to make sure they're investing every dollar correctly. And so there's a lot more scrutiny on what they're doing and the prioritization of what they're doing next. The flip side of that, though, is like, for example, the banking industry, 70 to 80% of new customers come in through bank branches and they're closed. So, that's a situation where there's a little bit more openness to taking, kind of rolling the dice on a new customer onboarding tool just to see if that might help spark some new online relationships. So I think my response would be generally, I think teams are a little bit down. And then depending on the industry, folks are kind of rolling the dice to try to put things out there that position them well. If the economy does recover quickly in certain sectors, they want to be, right at the forefront and not lagging behind other firms that did take a little bit more of an aggressive stance.
Absolutely. Ram, what about you?
I think in general, so here, I think map making is not an easy process, right? It's a long and arduous process, right? For all intents and purposes, it's about, here is a 10,000 employee company, and a lot of them are devoted to its production map making. And both Apple tried and Google tried. They cannot automate map making, right? You need to have human intervention to do things. What here is doing is utilizing this opportunity to redirect some of the resources to automate maps as much as we could. And that's been like a primary driver. And one of the cool new things that's been happening within here is pushing this idea of automating map making end to end. So when I look at it from that respect, absolutely our workload has not reduced. It's actually a lot more than what we used to have, I would put it that way.
Kira, what about you? Are your teams taking less or more risks or the same?
Yeah, I don't think that we're taking, I don't think we're taking less risk. I think, certain parts of the business, you can't take risk, right? In terms of like the diligence that you do in releasing something. But in some ways, for our user experience group and our product group, we're maybe taking a little more risk in the areas where, it's not, there's no compliance issue, right? We'll push something out a little bit sooner than, I mentioned this before, than we would have naturally done it in the past. But I don't feel like we're taking any less risk at all.
Great. Another question that came in, and Mark, I think you kind of mentioned this. What do you consider normal these days? So I do the air quotes around normal. Mark?
Yeah, I think for our part, I think some of the, oh, sorry, I thought you were Tina. That's me already. Yeah, I think what's been interesting, I think, I mentioned kind of the longer hours that everyone's working. It's been interesting, the norms around everyone just being ready for a cat to walk across the screen, or to have a child just show up with their homework and start talking to their parent. I mean, I think there's just, everybody gets it, right? Like there's a lot of things that are happening, or CEOs come into conference calls that they'd typically be suited up for, and they're wearing a t-shirt, right? Like there's a lot of those kind of like, hey, we're all in this together types of norms that are different. Otherwise, I mean, I think most of us kind of live in this box all day. I personally welcome times when I actually just get to have a phone call with somebody, so I don't have to stay in the frame and stay in my seat for the entire time. But I do feel like a lot of folks are working longer hours. One of the things that has been nice in the past, I would say like week or two, given the Memorial Day weekend, we've actually started seeing people start to take some vacation. Because for months, everyone is just, they're locked in, they're working long hours every day, no one's taking breaks. And some of that we've got to change a little bit, or people are going to lose it. So I think the norm right now that I think people are excited about is trying to figure out how they work from the office in a socially distant way, because we definitely have folks that are needing to get out of their 1-bedroom apartment because they're going stir crazy. So that'll be kind of the next thing to see how that evolves.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing a lot of these larger, Facebook, Twitter, going to full-time remote now, even beyond, the summertime. So it's really going to be interesting how it shapes sort of our new norm and technology, once all this is over.
Yeah.
What about you, Ram? What's the new norm look like these days, do you think?
I would rather call it as abnormal. Going into a Starbucks, knocking on the door, somebody dropping the coffee off, you walk back, and then you walk back again to pick up the coffee, right? So weird. I would call that as, right? That's kind of like the new normal. I think that's going to be like that for a while. And I think all this will change, but probably 1 year down the road, we'll all look back at it and say, "Wow, we did live a life, right? Which was a lot different than what we do, and maybe we all appreciate what we have." So, I think it's difficult, but I think I personally have kind of gotten used to a different lifestyle, which is okay. It's not too terrible.
Kira, what about you? What does the new normal look like?
Well, I was just petting my dog, so the new normal is we got a dog. Well, it's interesting. Again, I think because we were there was a lot of remoteness. We had already done some things that were normal. So a couple of those things that I think can be useful is we had these water cooler chats. So we would randomly get people in our group to get together for 15 minutes and just say hi to each other, which was, this was happening before the COVID-19 stuff. And then we get together as a group to communicate every Thursday at 3:00. And it's just if you're not browsing, the blog, the internal blog, it's just a way for us to be together as a group. So 350, 400 people every Thursday for a half hour. And then round tables and stuff, I think help forcing the collisions and forcing some of the conversations that might happen over lunch if a group of people were sitting down and talking. But I think also the new normal really is, interestingly, Paylocity has always had a cameras on. We basically need to have our cameras on. You're not allowed to hide behind a picture of yourself. And so interestingly, we actually are kind of laxing that a little bit because we know that there are kids and there are distractions. So kind of in an opposite way. But kids joining, as Mark said, and more stepping away from meetings. We actually see our executive team a lot more. They do an all company meeting every Friday at 10 a.m. So just a little bit more transparency and things happening more naturally rather than there having to be some big plan for things. So there have been some really great things that have come out of it.
That's great to hear. I want to bring up Destiny asked a great question here, I think, really relevant again to kind of the future of what this could look like. Some companies are starting to allow parts of their team to work remotely forever. Does that seem potentially feasible for your teams? And how might it change the way you work on a long-term basis? I'm going to open that to anyone that...
Yeah, I can quickly say our product and tech organization is going to be remote for the foreseeable future so that in the organization where people need to be face-to-face, they can space out people in the office to come into the office. So yes, and the way that it changes my work is that I need a standing desk because I only used to work from home 2 days a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo the standing desk as my number one thing that I wish I still had. I'm still working on that, so I'm with you, Kira. I don't think as DevBridge, I don't think we've gotten to the place now where we have remote forever. Our engineering, so our product management and product design is here in Chicago and Toronto and London, and then our engineering is in Lithuania. So there's always been this kind of relationship between teams being separated but getting together on a regular basis, flying people one place or another. So I don't think we're at a place yet where we're going to have everyone working from home remotely. I think there's going to be more flexibility and more ability to do that. I mean, I think Ram mentioned earlier, historically, I would have said that people, when they're transitioning between some days they're at home and some days they're in the office, there's productivity lost on one side or the other because you're not kind of in your element. I think a lot of people are more adept now. They have workspaces at home, so I think there's going to be more flexibility on people working remotely. But I don't think we're at a place yet where we're saying, like, that's it, we're not going to have the office space anymore. Everybody just stay at their desks at home.
Sure. Ram, anything else to add to that?
So that being said, hands down, I'm still not convinced. I think we're 100% productive when we work out of home. But that being said, right, everything changes at some point in time. I think this is probably what tips it, I guess. Some of the thought leaders, right or wrong, are already starting to do this. So again, if I ever want to work for Facebook, location is not a problem for me anymore. So that's good, right? So
great. The next question we had, this was another pre-submitted question. What are some innovative best practices for testing ideas in an environment where every sale abandoned matters? So I know it's a very specific question, but I think, there's some industries where every sale counts, from the acquisition and sales side. Does anyone want to chime in on that? I know, again, I mentioned this earlier at Active Campaign. We're working with small and medium-sized business, and that need email marketing, that need a CRM, sales automation. So our market's it's starting to get very saturated. So every sale counts in that aspect, and it's sort of a win-win. The business is relying on us as well. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that in your industries.
I mean, I can chime in. I mean, I think there's actually a couple different pieces to this question that I think are both interesting. Completely agree that every sale matters in this environment, and I would suggest, like, as a vendor, it's harder to get the attention of people that don't know you at all. So, like, the value of relationships has definitely gone up in this context. A lot of times you can meet face to face and people can get comfortable with you and you can move forward. In this environment where you can't do face to face, and it is a lot more two-dimensional here. It matters a lot more that there's some kind of a connection that gets things started. So in that context, like generating new business, a lot more success, I believe, is going to be through referrals than it is, just kind of aggressively targeting or talking to people that don't know you. And then the other thing I would say is, like, when you have the moment, we're definitely spending more time prepping materials so that we show up like full force, if you will, in that initial meeting to get people's attention and show them something that is momentum creating in the conversation, because it is harder to get people's attention. And again, it's absolutely true that each opportunity matters. So coming in, hopefully getting some kind of introduction and coming in a little bit more loaded for bear, if you will, is definitely what we're doing at this point.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to just do a quick time check here. We've got just a few more questions, just wrapping up. One that I think's really been interesting. I know we've all had a lot of downtime. We've all been stuck inside. Do any of you have any good podcasts or books or any resources that you've sort of discovered or rediscovered during this time that you could share?
I could go, actually, though.
Yeah,
if you want. Sure. I think there were a couple of podcasts. I think one in particular, which was very interesting. I think it's called as the Modern CTO. It's a great podcast. You hear from all the CTOs. You could kind of get a feel for how the big, how the successful ones walk, talk, and move, right? So a lot of interesting things. The other book that I really enjoyed reading was The Man Who Solved the Market. That's a Jim Simmons book. He was the father of quant. I think his company, Renaissance, the funds he has, called his Medallion Fund, has an average return of 66% from 1988 onward. So that was a very interesting read. Another book I think was the if you're ever interested in negotiations, there's a book by Chris Voss, which is really, really good. Absolutely a great read.
Excellent. What about you, Kira? Any good podcasts? Anything new? Again, maybe you've always.
No, in fact, I think that I am like less connected because I'm reading like more new. I'm less connected because I'm reading news about like the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'm like learning a lot about Common Core math, and I have taken up puzzles, and I have a sourdough starter, but nothing that is related to that question.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I'll chime in on the personal level. I've really enjoyed BoardGameArena.com as a way to still get together with my board gaming group and play good games. So plug for those guys. Personally, the book that I'm reading now is Your Brain at Work, and that is what's the name of the author? I can't remember his name. David Rock. There we go. Yeah, it's a David Rock. So that's a good book that I've enjoyed. I agree with Kira though. Like, I think news has been important. I guess just a couple sources that I like, because there's so much. It's hard to get unbiased news, right? So I'm a fan of The Economist. I look forward every day. They kind of send a daily email with some key highlights. I look forward to getting that from The Economist every day. And then I think the University of Chicago has also published some good research that I've enjoyed reading, because it's kind of like refreshingly based on a little bit more of an objective perspective, I guess I'll say. So.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I just need to mention this. We do play Jackbox TV, which is really fun. So yeah. I highly recommend that.
Yeah, we've played that as well. It's a good one.
And then we have Tiger King, right? So.
So yeah, I just want to sort of wrap things up, and then we'll jump to any last minute questions that the live audience might have. Really, what are some of the biggest lessons or takeaways you guys have had? We've been doing this for 2 or 3 months now. We're continuing to probably do it here throughout the summer. What are some lessons learned? Just overall, what are some takeaways you'd like to share with the audience? I'll open it to anyone that wants to start that one. And sort of just.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I think it's about relationships, right? I think there used to be a term or time, at least, when we used to think if we can't see face to face, we can't build relationships, we can't keep it going. But that has changed over this whole pandemic, and I think people are putting more concerted effort to stay in touch with the team, and they're figuring out new ways to do it. So, which is absolutely a positive thing to do. So, so that I think was a big takeaway for me.
I completely agree with that. I mean, like the relationships, Rami mentioned like skip levels, like one-on-ones, kind of virtual setting up coffee with people just to chat. I think that's all very important, and I completely agree. And then I would just underscore what I kind of mentioned about people actually finding time to unplug. I feel like we definitely need to encourage our teams to take a little bit of a break and disconnect, because it's definitely been a pretty full-on several weeks that people need to try to enjoy the summer somehow. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more flexibility with social distancing to allow people to restore a little bit.
Yeah, I think I echo some of the same things that Ram and Mark are saying. I think, Ram mentioned empathy earlier and relationships. I think, for me, in some ways, I actually like to have a personal relationship with the people that I work with, and have an understanding of kind of what they have and bring from outside of work. And so in some ways, like, it's opened that door, which has been really, really nice. And I think Another thing is, there's so much out there about like what's right and what's wrong, and like, who should wear a mask and who shouldn't wear a mask, like whatever. It's just like, I think that you just have to meet people where they are, because this is new and no one has ever been through this before, right? Like there is no right and wrong. It's just we're figuring it out. So
yeah, I'd love to add on to this, just some takeaways I've had as well. I think one thing you can get very easily sucked into the non-work-life balance, I think, in this kind of environment. And so I've really tried to be disciplined about setting a routine every day, showering at the same time, getting dressed, having my normal work schedule that I normally would, and separating that at the end of the day, I think is important. And I've tried to, sort of emphasize that with my teams as well. Well, great. I think that was a great way to sum things up, I think. So thank you all. I want to we have about 10 minutes left. I want to just open it up to any other last minute questions for the audience. If we didn't cover anything that you'd love to ask our panel. I also will say, if any of you would like, to connect with our speakers, feel free to find them on LinkedIn. We don't have their contact information posted, but I'd say LinkedIn's probably the best appropriate way. But yeah, any other questions? We'll give it a minute here, and then we'll end if we don't have anything else. All right, I think nothing came in so far, so I think we can wrap things up, everyone. Thank you all so much for your time tonight and sharing your experiences and your tips with the group. I think this was a great topic, I think, and a great way we can come together and celebrate World Product Day. As Sirisha mentioned, it's the 10th year. We will likely have another one. We're trying to have at least one event per quarter this year. We don't know what the landscape's going to look like, so the next one may be remote as well. If anyone has any feedback or would like to speak, or any topics you'd like to see, feel free to reach out to us on the meetup page at ProductTank Chicago. Thank you, everyone. We'll wrap up here. Thank you again, Mark, Ram, Kira, for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And I want to give a shout out to Hannah, who actually has been behind the scenes helping us all set up everything. So thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Back to you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.